I'm going to introduce you to my friend Albert Navarez, who has an amazing testimony to share. Albert, where were you born?
I was born in East Los Angeles.
Tell me about your family growing up.
My mother raised us as a single parent. My father died when I was very young. And I basically was the baby of the family. So I was quite spoiled and kind of did almost what I wanted to do as I grew up. I had to go to school, of course, but I just had a way of getting around the rules that everybody else had to be subject to.
Okay. So because your father wasn't around early on, and your mother had to work, I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay. So what did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, actually, I didn't graduate from high school.
Oh.
My daughter was born when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
I got together with my future wife. Her name is Helen.
Okay.
And my daughter, Lisa, was born in 1978. I was 16, and I dropped out of high school in order to start working and trying to provide for her and my future wife, Helen.
That must have been very difficult. What did you do as your first job to provide for your family?
I worked for a family member who was a manager of a chemical company.
Oh.
So I worked with him for about a year and a half, and then decided to join the service.
Which service did you join?
I joined the U.S. Army.
Okay. And how long were you serving in the Army?
I was in the Army for 3 years.
Okay.
I did my 3 years in the Army and got out.
Did you see combat?
No, I didn't. I was during the Cold War era.
Okay.
So I didn't see any combat.
Okay. Where did you serve?
I served in Germany for almost 2 years, and the rest of the time in Oklahoma.
Was your wife in Germany with you?
No, my wife didn't come till when I moved back to Oklahoma.
Okay.
We had gotten married when I was on leave, and she wanted to come and stay with me while we were in Oklahoma, which was about the last 8 months of my tour.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell me about the events that were extremely significant to you that ended up in you becoming addicted to drugs.
Well, while I was in Germany, the lifestyle was just, we didn't have too much work. So it was basically every day a case of beer, and we smoked a lot of hash, a lot of opium.
In Germany?
In Germany.
And was your wife aware of this?
No. Actually, nobody but the guys that were around me were aware of this.
So the people in your unit were involved in drugs?
Yes.
Okay.
In my platoon.
How widespread do you think it was?
Not very. Just, we had a close-knit group.
Just a few people out of the whole platoon that you were aware of was doing this. Okay. So you were doing drugs in Germany as part of your platoon. Okay. And tell me more.
Well, we would go to different concerts and things. Germany was just like a big party, actually. Although the job that I had was kind of strenuous and weren't allowed to travel much because we had top secret security clearances. But basically, it was just a beer drinking party while I was there for 18, almost 2 years.
And I'm certain you know, even back then, that having a top secret security clearance, if they found out you did drugs, you would have lost that clearance and it might have even ended up in the brig, right?
Yes.
But you did it anyway.
It's a thing called nuclear surety. So it's like a fighter pilot, when he's able and cleared to fly, we had nuclear surety in order to be around a missile.
So you were involved in nuclear weapons?
Yes.
And you were doing drugs?
Yes.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, it was. But I did my 3 years. I was medaled. I got a medal while I was there. And got out. I think I should have stayed in. But at the time, it was just, I want to get out, I want to get away, and I want to be with my family. And so I left Germany, and the last 8 months was, I'm getting out. I'm going to seek employment when I get out and find something else.
So you hadn't done any drugs until the Army, or was there drug use before that?
I smoked a little bit of weed when I was in high school and stuff.
So it would be fair to say that marijuana for you was the gateway drug?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It was definitely the gateway drug for me.
So do you think you would have gotten into the harder stuff if you had never gotten into marijuana?
No.
So for you, it would be a fair statement to say that you believe that marijuana is definitely a gateway drug in general?
Yes, definitely. It opened my mind and gave me more curiosity about what else was out there.
Okay.
So it wasn't something that I had to make a big decision about. It was like, yeah, you know. But when I got out, I still had the security clearance. Mm-hmm. So I went around and was looking for a job in the city as a security officer.
Okay.
And I found a limited position with the Water and Power.
Okay.
And I filled in for somebody that was out sick. And I was at that job for 7 or 8 months, and the gentleman came back to work, which left me without a job. I applied for a different job at the City Hall. And they hired me with the little 6-month experience and with my military background. I was hired. And I worked at the City Hall for almost a year as a security officer, right at City Hall. Mm-hmm. And one day, where I grew up at was right across the street from the Women's County Jail.
No kidding.
Right across. I mean, literally, when the women would get out at midnight, they would go through my neighborhood. I mean, less than a quarter of a mile from my home.
And you've seen these women leaving that facility?
Year after year after year. So, although I was married, I winded up seeing a couple gals, and they flagged me down. And
because they needed a ride?
They needed a ride.
Okay.
So the object was to get a ride. So I gave them a ride, and they said, "Hey, can we stop here?" So I said, "Sure." So they stopped there. I didn't know what they were doing. They picked up some heroin. And they asked us, "Hey, let's find a safe place." And we actually drove to the Evergreen Cemetery. And we were parked in the Evergreen Cemetery. And they started doing their thing, you know, they fixed up their dope.
Oh, there was more than one woman you picked up?
Yeah, there was 2.
Okay.
So,
so the cemetery is sort of symbolic for what's going to happen in your life, right?
Exactly. So I'm sitting there, I'm watching, and I've never even had a thought about trying something that hard.
Okay, so you hadn't done heroin
not at all.
Until this point?
No. I had the opium that I smoked in Germany, but I had I've never used a needle, and they used a needle to get high.
Okay.
And one of the gals, she asked me if I wanted to. And with all these things that I had going in my life, I said yes. And I tried it. For no good reason. You know, I had a good job, my wife, my little girl, you know. We were living with my mom at the time, but she needed the help with running the house. And for no reason, I said yes. And that one time, just that one time, ruined my life.
That one time you tried it led to a whole debacle.
Lifetime of misery.
So that old saying, curiosity killed the cat, has special meaning for you.
Yes, definitely. So I became attached to this one girl that offered me that.
Oh.
So when I would go to work, I would go see her after.
Oh no.
And it wasn't about seeing her, it was about the drug then.
She was your source to heroin.
Right. So it was about 2 or 3 weeks when I realized that I was actually addicted.
Okay.
And come to find out later that it wasn't really too bad if I would have tried to stop then.
So had you decided to stop then, you think you had the willpower
Oh, definitely.
to completely cut it off?
Yeah, I think I would have been able to get through it. And like I say, from that very moment that I tried it and I felt that I was addicted, every day of my life was trying to get off of it after that. Every day. But I would go ahead.
So at this point, you're not saved yet?
No, not at all. So I'm going from day to day using. And there was one day where I was in between checks and she didn't have any money. And we decided to break into a house.
No
to
kidding.
commit a burglary.
Wow. To get your drugs?
To get our drugs. And it was a friend of a friend that I knew that had a couple guns there. It was a friend of a friend, so we actually kind of looked around, didn't know that the person upstairs in the apartment upstairs was actually watching us. So,
really?
So by the time I got in the back door, the police were already at the front door.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I didn't even really get too far into the place where they came in the front door and arrested me right away.
So were you arrested before you even got your hands on the things you were trying to steal?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
That fast?
I was in the back door and arrested almost within 2 minutes.
Okay.
So at that moment, they took me to the Monterey Park Police Department. And I was in my mother's car. So they called my mother. And my mother not only found out that I committed a burglary, and my wife, but that I was a heroin addict.
All at once?
Because all at once, they seen the tracks on my arm. So they told her, not only did your son break into a home, but did you know that your son was a heroin addict? So that was all at one time. I spent a few weeks and one of my sisters bailed me out. I still work for the city of Los Angeles. I still worked at City Hall. So I would go to work and I was still addicted.
How long did it take before you were bailed out? Did you spend a significant time in jail?
It was about a week.
You didn't lose your job for not showing up?
No, I didn't.
Did somebody call in for you and say, oh, he's sick?
I think my wife might have called for me.
Okay.
But it was okay because I went right back to work and I was working.
Okay.
And addicted. And I worked at the graveyard shift. And I would get high at the desk of City Hall, where the bridge between City Hall East and Old City Hall, I would get high right there at the desk at night.
At your job?
At my job.
What was your job? What did you do there?
I was a security officer.
Okay. So you didn't have like paperwork to do. You're there to do security, which there's not a lot to do.
You hit the clock, you go, you have your rounds.
Okay.
But eventually, I winded up going to Superior Court. The police officer had piled a bunch of things at the doors saying that I had this ready to take and this and that. They made sure that they had a good case against me.
Okay, so this is the case from you breaking in, attempted robbery. Okay, so this is now catching up to you.
Yes. And even though I was out on bail, I was still addicted.
You're still doing drugs.
I'm still doing drugs. I'm still spending my money from my check on drugs. I'm still living with my mother, and I don't know exactly what they thought, but as long as I was still working, I think they believed that I had stopped. But I hadn't. And I went through, the trial was about, well, not actually a trial, but the proceedings, and I eventually took a plea deal that took about 2 months, so I was working still for about 2 months.
Okay.
And the more the time went on, the more that I would use.
So what was the plea deal?
The plea deal was 5 years of summary probation, no, of formal probation, and 4 years joint suspended. along with a year in the county jail.
A year in the county jail?
Yes.
Full time?
Yes.
So you spent a year in county jail?
Yes.
Not working. Now your wife has to take care of the family?
Yes.
Okay.
So I did my year in the county jail, and I had probation after. It was formal probation. So I had to drug test, but when I got out, I was still, my mind, I was fully engulfed in using still. So eventually, I tested dirty, and my probation officer gave me a chance, and I tested dirty again. And then I was taken back to court, and since I had the joint suspended, when I went back to court, they gave me the joint time, which was 5 years.
So
minus the county jail time.
Okay.
So
part of the terms of the probation was that you had to stay clean during those 4 years.
Yes.
And if you didn't stay clean, you did the whole 5 years.
Yes.
And now you got the whole 5 years.
So I got the whole 5 years minus the county jail time that I had served. So here I am. I'm on a bus on the way up north. I had, military background, so I was going to a low-level prison.
Okay.
And I was probably gonna go to fire camp. And I was there in Jamestown when I got there for a few weeks, and just happened to be out in the yard when there was a very large riot on the yard.
Oh no.
We stood on the yard for 18 hours without going back into our buildings. So when they finally contained everybody, they took about 50 or 60 of us and put us into the hole, into a lockdown. Thinking that I was part of the riot when I just happened to be stuck out there.
Right.
So a few months later, we had a hearing saying that we couldn't be there no more. So we had to be transferred. So I got transferred to San Quentin.
Hard time.
Yeah. So my first time in prison, thinking I'm going to go to fire camp, I winded up in the big house in the early 80s. So it was still kind of wild west there.
You must have been frightened.
Yeah, yes, I was. Yeah. And I was about 24 years old when I got there.
Wow.
So I survived. I don't know how I did, but I survived. I hooked up with the Southern Mexican crowd, and they took care of us, and we took care of each other. We were outnumbered, and every day was a day of survival. I couldn't go anywhere without another person with me. And but as the days went on, I started exercising. I was clean. I didn't have the addiction in me anymore.
Oh, so there wasn't access to heroin?
Oh, there was access to heroin.
But you chose not to?
I chose not to because I see what had happened to those that would receive it and not be able to pay it back.
Oh,
yeah.
Violence.
It was a real steep penalty for not being able to pay back. So I stood away from it. So I did a lot of exercising, and I jogged a little, not much, but a lot of weightlifting.
So were you clean the whole time you were in San Quentin?
I was clean.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that part of my life, being clean and being healthy. And the 3.5 years went by, and it came to the day that I had to go home. And I was kind of excited because I said, okay, now I can start my life.
Clean.
Clean.
Okay.
Here I am. I'm healthy. I'm clean. The state gives you $200 when you leave. It's called gate money. So I take my gate money, and as soon as I walked out the gate, Tony, I mean, the moment my foot stepped through the gate, it was calling me.
You had the desire to do drugs immediately?
No, to do heroin.
Heroin. Specifically heroin.
Yeah. So there was this guy that was from San Francisco, and he says, yeah, I know where to get it, let's go. Right? He had just received a letter from his parents and a a $14,000 check saying, here, don't come home.
He received a $14,000 check from his parents, and they said, don't come home. Here's your money, get out of here.
So here I am with this guy. He's got $14,000 in his pocket, and he's saying, let's go party, you know?
So you're his best friend at this point.
Yeah. So we go to a place called the Tenderloin over, it's kind of like Skid Row. In the Tenderloin.
In San Francisco.
We find a little hotel, we find a little spot, and you know, I've been clean. So I got really, really wasted. And we walked out of that hotel on our way to the bus because he was going to come to Los Angeles with me. Mm-hmm. He was from the Bay Area, but he said, let's go to Los Angeles. So we're crossing the street and I'm holding him up, but we are so loaded, you could just tell, you know?
Okay.
And a San Francisco PD police car pulled right by and was looking at us. And I said to myself, oh my goodness. And then I looked and they got their blinker on and they're gonna turn around and come for us, right? I hadn't even gotten home. And my buddy, I let him fall. I ran across the street through the cars, winded up in the bus station, got a bus ticket and went and sat in my bus and made it home.
Okay.
I made it home and I already had the heroin in my system.
You're now re-addicted after one more.
After being clean for so long, you know.
Oh,
it was just something I couldn't understand why, you know.
Even though you were clean, you were still addicted in your mind.
Yeah, I thought it was just, what else could it be? Why would my body want it that fast? What is it that's what it was, you know? So I get to Los Angeles, I get home, my family and everybody, okay, you're gonna do good, and my wife got a job, and I got a job, and on the side I was using heroin. Had everything going for me, you know? And I would start using again. And then once you start to use, the addiction is so bad that every morning that you wake up, you gotta have it. It's like having a bad flu with all the symptoms of a flu.
Really?
I mean,
the body aches?
The body aches, the diarrhea, the cramps in your stomach, the headaches, this cold sweats in the morning, every morning. Wow. Every morning until you got. So what it was that you went from that state to bliss in a matter of as long as it took you to get to that drug. Because heroin is like a bliss. It's just, it gets you to a point where you're like you're not unconscious, but you're just like on a cloud nine, you're floating. You know?
It takes you from hell to heaven.
Exactly. So I knew that. I knew that once I started feeling that way and enjoying that, I said, I'm completely hooked. So I would work, and eventually my mother and my wife found out that I was still getting high. But I still had a job, and I still went to work, but I had to be high.
Okay.
Yeah. So I knew at that moment that I wasn't gonna last. You know, I knew that the only thing that could take me back under control was to be locked up. Yeah. And eventually I got locked up.
How did you get locked up again?
Okay, I got locked up again because I lost my job. Because in the morning, if I don't have money to go get high, I gotta go make some money to get high. So I started stealing. I wasn't the kind of person that could go and put something under their shirt, you know. So I always had a car, so I would go around and find large things from companies and steal them and sell them. And so I would survive by that. I would survive by stealing, and not only stealing, but enough for a good week worth of money. so I would be able to provide for a few days, but not for my family.
I see.
You know, it was always for me, because I knew that one day I was going to wake up without it.
So everything you made from stealing was spent on the habit?
Yes. Yeah, and it wasn't that I had, there's some guys that take their tolerance goes where they can use $200-300 a day. I barely use $20 a day, just enough to get by. So I still knew that eventually I was going to get caught, and yeah, I got caught. And I was out from 88 to 90.
For this particular crime?
Yeah. And in 1990, yes, early 1990.
So that was like a 2-3 year stint.
2 years.
2 years, plus the 5 from before, that's 7 years so far.
Yeah. Well, I got arrested after 2 years. I hadn't got my time.
Okay.
I got 26 months for that theft.
Okay, that's a little over 2
Yeah.
years.
So, and then they sent me to Corcoran State Penitentiary, which was like the new San Quentin.
Okay.
So I'm like,
Hard time.
I'm going from one to another, you know, and it's really, really a lot of pressure to fall in and to be a part of everything that goes on. So I started turning into that person where I was obedient to what had to be done. You know, I became an enforcer. I became somebody that if something needed to be done, they'd say, hey, you know, I went from Albert to Beto. They called me Beto.
Really?
So I was known already.
When you say enforcer, I think I know what you mean. Can you define that?
Okay, say that one of the guys are selling heroin and there's somebody that's not paying, maybe a white guy or maybe a black guy, you know? They would say, hey, I need a favor. Yeah, what do you need? I need you to go tune up this guy because he hasn't paid.
Okay.
So, or there's somebody here that's our race that's a child molester. You know, you and you, you know, or you take these two guys and make sure they do it the right way. So I kind of already had experience, and I was starting to get my name known, and it was pretty hairy because they have the big shoe program at Corcoran, and the guys that would come out of the shoe program always had something to do. There was always something that had to be taken care of. And, you know, the guys that were willing to do it, which one I became because I wanted to be in that game, I participated in a lot of those things. So, my time came to the end, and then again, I wasn't getting high.
So you stayed addicted in prison this time? Or
no.
You got clean again?
Every time I would not use because I seen the end results of somebody getting something on credit and not being able to pay it back.
So you were clean in prison even the second time?
Even the second time.
But after you get out again and immediately you're hooked again?
Exactly. When Corcoran is in the San Joaquin Valley.
Okay.
So when you leave those penitentiaries up north, you take the train, and the train right ends at Bakersfield, right? Now, the train doesn't come over the mountain. You have to take a bus over the mountain.
Oh.
So the train will leave you at the bus station. Well, everybody knows that the guys getting out are gonna wind up at the bus station. So there's heroin dealers there galore, you know?
Oh, they knew who their customers are.
That's
and where
a famous point where people die.
Really? From overdose?
From overdose.
Because they just got out of prison.
They just got out.
And they're partying.
They think, I'm going to do what I used to do, and they're finding them dead every day.
Maybe it's because their tolerance is no longer as high as it used to be when they got in.
So I think that time as well, I got high in Bakersfield. But I was okay, because I already knew that you know, I know that I can't use that much because I've been clean. So that was, I got home in 1991, and got a job, was doing good. And right around that time, my wife had gotten saved.
And you're still married at this point? She never
Yes.
left you?
Oh, no, she never left me. So we had our own little place, and she started going to church. She started praying for me. And a few times I would go to church with her, you know. She said, let's go to church, okay, before you start again, you know. So I remember one day I was on the bus, and I don't remember where I was going, but I went downtown and I picked up a bag, and I was clean. I was clean, I wasn't using, and I had the bag in my hand. I was on the ride back on the bus, and I thought to myself, this is gonna ruin my life right here. This little $10 bag is gonna put me on the fast track right back to prison. So my mind says, open the window and throw it out the window. So I don't know if that was the Lord or not, but I opened the window and said to myself, man, I just paid $10 for this. I'm not throwing it out the window. And sure enough, little by little, it worked its way back into my life. I had a fairly good job, but I had a parole officer that didn't take anything. She was really strict, and she locked me back up right away.
Because you had to be tested.
Yeah. Even though I had a good job, I was doing good, and I was building my tolerance, but I still worked the whole week because they paid good enough money where I could give some money to my wife and still have enough to get high and work at the same time. And my wife's going to church, and she's praying for me, and she's praying for me.
Mm.
But eventually, yeah, it got too much, and they took me back into custody.
Okay. So, how many years did you spend this time?
Well, I did 26 months in Corcoran, and I was out. I got out in 91, and within a year, maybe a year and a month or a year and 2 months, I was back in the system.
Mm.
And then, while I was in the county jail, I got mixed up in some political stuff in the county jail because somebody knew who I was, and they knew that I was loyal to the cause.
And this, when you say political, you mean gang-related?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't get caught for anything, and that was close because I probably would have got a serious term. So I went to Wasco State Penitentiary, and I went to Wasco State Penitentiary with about 3.5 years sentence.
Mm.
And I got there, and you know, I fell right in with, you know, they had already knew I was coming. Word gets around.
Really? Even before you arrive, the inmates know who's coming?
Or when you first get there, you go to a segregation unit. They want to make sure that you're okay to be on the main line. And the word gets out that so-and-so's in seg. So they, oh yeah, I know who he is, he's good.
Okay.
So they knew I was coming. So I get to the 3-yard, and yeah, political, but not as much. So I kind of break away from them. I start exercising again. I start a little jogging, and
you're clean again.
And I'm clean again, you know, and I'm loving it, you know.
So this actually is interesting. This seems to indicate that if you want to be off, you can be off of drugs.
Yes.
There's a part of you that has the power to not be on drugs.
While I was inside. See, when you're inside, yeah, it's there, but my mind says, don't do it. You see what happened to so-and-so. You see what happened to this person. And you know what? So to me, it was like there wasn't anything there for me.
So you feared getting beat up because you couldn't pay.
Yeah.
But when you're out, you didn't fear the Lord as much as you feared getting beat up in prison.
Well, I didn't know the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
But for people who may know the Lord, right? they don't fear him enough. They don't fear him as much as a gang in the prison, for instance.
Right, yeah. Because at the time I didn't know what it was, that I would feel so good, and yet as soon as I would get out, my mind would completely go crazy for heroin again. And I got out in 96.
Okay.
So I went in 93, I got out in 96. And I did a small year violation for using again. So,
again?
Yeah, so I got out and I started using again. And all this time I had been to an inpatient program, an outpatient program, NA, AA, CA, everything that I could possibly find, but nothing worked, nothing helped me. I would still go right back to heroin.
Is it fair to say that it's a matter of the will?
Well, actually, come to find out that the heroin was a spirit.
Mm.
And the only way out of that spirit was to be delivered.
Mm.
So I had this spirit that would cry. As soon as I would step through the door, it would cry out for me and draw me right back. So at the time I didn't know it. I just, you know, the word on the street is once a heroin addict, always a heroin addict.
There's a degree of truth.
Yeah. You know, you never get over it. Well, that's a lie in my case. But finally, see, when I would start using in my home, I would take things and steal things from my wife. And not only that, where we lived, my young daughters were growing up, and the kids in the neighborhood that were their age, they knew who was what, you know? So they knew I was a heroin addict. So I shamed my children a lot, you know, and they were, I guess they were ashamed of me, you know, and I don't blame them.
So their friends knew that their dad was a heroin addict.
Yeah, they knew.
It's a lot of shame to bear.
To put on them, you know,
right.
Let alone myself, you know, but yeah, my wife I drove crazy, you know, because I needed money every day.
And you stole from your own wife?
Oh yeah, definitely. The majority of the times I would go out and steal things, because I always had a car. And but there were times where I needed to ask her for money, or I would take something from the house and sell it, you know. So it was just misery, you know. And so what I would do is, after I was addicted, I would just leave the house. You know, I would just go and stay with a friend, or, you know, go and stay where a few dope fiends or drug addicts were living together. And I would be out of the house. I always had a car, so they always wanted me around. Mm-hmm. So the last time I started using again, I didn't have a car. So I was kind of lost. And I knew I didn't want to be around my wife and my kids anymore. Mm-hmm. I didn't want them to see me. Dad's getting high again, you know? And my wife, I had, you know, she just wouldn't let go. She just kept praying for me. And she never gave up on me.
Right.
And I winded up downtown, because I knew that if there was gonna be drugs around, that downtown is an area where they're always at, you know. So I was down there for about 4 or 5 months, and my sisters and my brother-in-laws, they would come and bring me food and money on the weekend.
When you say you were downtown,
I was on Skid Row.
that means you were homeless.
Yeah.
But why didn't you go home?
Because I didn't want to be around my kids and my wife anymore. I didn't want to put them through the years of what the, now at that time it'd been about 18 or 19 years of me using and conniving and lying and stealing and shaming them, you know. So I just wanted to get away. And then I also know I'm addicted. So I gotta be where the drugs are at. So I was downtown there on between 6th and 5th on San Julian. And there was a little place where you could spend the night there. They had like a little sidewalk area inside in a little community center that they would let you sleep there. And there was always food around. So I lived there for about 4 months. I got a job working with a textile guy. Since I was always big and kind of strong, I would roll the big textile rolls off the truck and make some money. But on the weekends, I didn't have any money because the textile place was closed. So every day I wake up, I'm sick, I gotta have it. I'm telling you, it's like I got the double flu every morning.
So when you were homeless, did you ever have to sleep on the streets, or did you?
Yes.
How did you make do? How did you live?
Well, what I had like a bedroll. Now, if you weren't able to get into the place where they would allow you, they had a storage place there. So you could take your bedroll or a bag and check it in there. Even if you couldn't stay there, they would allow you to hold your stuff there. So if there wasn't place there, I'd have to go and get my bag, my bedroll, and find a spot on the sidewalk.
So you literally slept on the street?
On the sidewalk, yeah.
Did you find places that you felt were safer?
Yeah. Plus, I had been there for a little while, so I kind of knew everybody. I knew where not to go, and I knew the safer places there, you know?
So you being a bigger guy, were you ever attacked on the street?
No, not really,
okay.
You know.
But do you know of other people who were not as big as you getting jumped or robbed?
All the time. You know, a lot of people there, the first of the month would come around and they would get their Social Security checks and things, and they lived downtown and they would get robbed all the time.
Okay, but for you, fortunately, you're a big guy and people didn't mess with you.
Yeah, I knew how to handle myself.
Okay.
Right, so I was okay, and still every day I get up, I'm sick, I gotta do something, you know. So that's when I would call my family, my sisters, and they would bring me some money sometimes and bring me some food on the weekends, because there was just no getting anything on the weekends. So it would be torturous for me, you know. And I wouldn't want to call, but I would eventually call. And I got a brother-in-law that would say, "Don't worry, I'll be down there." And he'd come by and he'd bring me some food and give me a couple dollars and stuff, just to get me by.
Right.
And like I said, every morning, I gotta have it. You know, there's no way around it. I gotta survive, and part of my survival is either get locked up where I can't go nowhere, or hustle in order to get enough money to do it. So one day I woke up, I was on the sidewalk, I wasn't able to get in the spot where they would let you lay down inside, and I was on the sidewalk and I woke up, and I get up and I'm thinking, now what am I gonna do today? You know, what kind of stupid things am I gonna have to do today to get high today?
Could you have gotten home or gone home at any time?
My wife would have let me come home, but my daughters didn't want me home.
Okay.
No, they didn't want me around them anymore. So that morning I got up, I felt that there was something different, you know? And, you know, all this time since 1992, my wife is praying every day for me.
Since she got saved?
Since she got saved, she had been praying for me every day. This was 1999.
7 years.
In December. So it was in December 1999, about the 20th of the month. And like I said, I woke up that morning and something was different, you know, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but then I like, I'm not sick, right? I'm thinking, okay, Well, sometimes when I get up a little too early, it hasn't fully kicked in yet, but it wasn't early. And I'm thinking, wow, what's the deal here? You know, I'm not sick today. I don't have any withdrawals. I don't have a headache. I don't have a stomach cramps. I don't have diarrhea. I don't, you know, I'm like normal. And I'm like, wow, what's going on? You know, so I get up, I roll up my stuff, and right away I go to one of the missions to eat breakfast. And if I haven't gotten high, I can't hold food down.
Really?
When I had a full breakfast. And I'm like, wow, what's going on, you know? And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not sick, so you know what I want to do? I want to get off the street. I didn't know what had happened to me. So I go check in the Salvation Army. And they asked me, are you on drugs? I said, no, you know what, I'm good today. And they said, what do you mean by today? I said, well, yesterday I was drug addicted big time. Today I'm good. So, you know, they're a religious organization, so they started praying for me and said, brother, you know what, you might have been delivered.
Miraculously.
Yeah.
But were you asking God, crying out the night before? You weren't doing anything?
Actually, I had been calling my wife, and she was telling me, you just need to come to church, you know. So it was on my mind, you know.
Okay.
Because you know what? If I had the courage, I would have killed myself. Yeah. Because I didn't have any hope. I didn't know what I was going to do from day to day. My family, everything was gone, you know. So when he said that, I thought about it to myself. I said, my wife's been praying for me all this time. So I called her. I got her on the phone. I said, look, you know what? I don't know what happened, but I'm not high today. And, you know, she, of course, like, yeah, right. And I said, no, really, I'm in this place right now where I'm going to be staying. And she said, oh, that's good. She said, but what are you going to do tomorrow, you know?
Right.
I said, I'm telling you, I'm not high no more. I have no addiction. I have no withdrawals. You know, something's happened in my life and I cannot explain it. So I was there for a week at the Salvation Army. I went through everything. I did chores and stuff, and I ate breakfast and ate lunch and dinner like I was a normal person again. And my wife's church, they had a Christian home. And I had been there twice. But the very next morning, I would leave. You know, because I had to get out of it. So I called my wife and I said, look, I've been here a week. And why don't you call your pastor and see if you can get me in the home again, the Christian home. And she said, well, I don't know. You left the last couple of times. I don't know if they want you to go back in. So I said, just give them a call and see. So she called me back and she said, yeah. He said, tomorrow, to be at the church tomorrow, and they'll take you to the home. You know, and she said, I want to go pick you up, but the girls don't want you here. I said, okay, well, I'll be here tomorrow. You just pick me up from here and take me to the church. And from there, I'll go to the men's home.
How old are your daughters at this point?
At the time, my daughters are probably 13 and 16. And my wife came for me the next day, and I went to the men's home. And the guys that were there, they said, oh, we remember you. You jumped the wall last time you left. I said, oh, you remember that? Oh, he goes, yeah, are you gonna jump the wall again? I said, no, I'm not. I'm here because, you know what, I don't know what happened to me. You know, one day I'm strung out on the sidewalk in Skid Row, and the next day I'm normal, you know?
But right now you're still not saved?
No. So they said, you know what? I think that the Lord delivered you, bro, from this. I said, because you know what? Right now, I don't have any desire for it. you know.
So when you were clean in prison, did you have desire?
No.
So the times you were clean in prison, you did not have a desire.
I did not have the desire.
So, but this is sort of the same effect as that.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the men's home director, he said, well, you know what, brother, have you given your life to the Lord? I said, I've said the words before, but it never meant, you know, it didn't land on good soil, you know. So we prayed, and he asked me if I wanted to accept the Lord. I accepted the Lord. And there you have a program. So in the morning you read your Bible for an hour. They give you a cup of coffee, you have breakfast, and then you pray for another hour. And this is every day. And they make sure that you're busy all the time. And that was the last day of the month, 1999, I was there. I got there, and then that very night was New Year's. So I was there almost the whole year. I became the director of the Christian home, because
no kidding.
I was so serious about following God. No, and I at that moment I said, it had to have been God that saved me.
So when you prayed to receive Jesus that last time,
yeah,
then you really changed.
Yeah, the Lord started to work in my life.
How long did it take from arriving at that home that last time to the time you became a director?
Probably about 4 months.
4 months?
Yeah.
Reminds me of Joseph being in prison. He ended up running the prison.
Yeah. Well, see, the pastor knew I was serious. And there's guys that are in the men's home that they're there because of this, or because of parole, or because of the probation office. But he seen this sincerity in me, knowing that I wanted to change my life. I got this chance right now. I'm not going to let it go, you know. I know it was God that did that for me, because I tried everything else and nothing else worked. I know my wife's been praying for me. I was talking to the brother saying, you know what, I think that all this time my wife's been praying, that finally my prayer came to the Lord, and the Lord said, it's time. Or I had no idea, but I just figured that it was my wife's prayer that did it, you know. And from that moment, the Lord had been working in my life. I became the director of the... I even went to court. The pastor came and told me one day, he says, get dressed. I said, for what? He goes, you're going to go to Ventura County Court and get a guy out.
Really?
At the courthouse. I said, I am? He said, you are. You're going to go and stand before the judge and explain the program, and the judge is going to release that guy to you. And I was like, oh, okay. And sure enough, I walked in there. I said, I'm from, you know, Ventura Christian Outreach, and I'm the program director, and yes, we have a place for him, and yes, he'll be supervised by me. And they released him into my custody. That was amazing, you know. Wow. That's how the Lord started using me, you know. Because I was serious about not letting go what he had given me. But see, all this time I didn't have the desire. He not only saved me from it, but he took the desire from me, from that drug.
So the difference this time is, you know, you're clean, but you don't have this desire to go back to whatever pleasure you received from the drugs.
It's not like when I walked out of the gate and right away I had that pull to go and get drugs.
So it seems like while you're in prison and you were clean, the only thing keeping you from getting back into the drugs was fear of getting beat up because you couldn't pay up.
Well, yeah.
But now, this time, when you're clean on the street, this final time, you stayed clean because you no longer had the desire.
I didn't have the desire to get high anymore.
And there wasn't even fear of the shame and the homelessness and all that stuff.
You know what? All that was gone. You know, I didn't think back. I didn't look back. I would think about my wife and what I had did to her and my children. But I was already changed already. Just the reading and the praying every day, it was part of our program, you know?
Okay.
And
so you read the Bible a lot?
Every morning. Every morning.
Did you feel that changed who you were?
I didn't know it was that, but I know it was the Word of God that changed my life.
Okay, so when you started to read the Bible, you could feel that it changed you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, you know, I was on Skid Row. I cussed and smoked and, you know, and little by little I realized one day, I said, hey, you know what? I stopped cussing, you know? I don't cuss anymore. And also, we would have guest pastors come and give us Bible studies every other day.
Wow.
So it was full on Jesus Christ, you know? And I guess the Lord started telling me that it was a spirit that I delivered you from. But now that you're delivered, you don't have to look back. Now, have you ever, okay, just say for example, you're walking down the street and you know, like marijuana is everywhere now and you smell the marijuana.
Yes.
Sometimes it'll take you back or say, wow, I remember that smell. But I would see other heroin addicts and I know who they are.
You can tell by the way they look.
Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've been where the pastor has said, okay, collect the money from this guy's Social Security that he's going to give you the money, put in an envelope, save it for me. So I had $700-800 there, you know, but I didn't have the desire to get high anymore.
You could have stolen that money.
I could have left. But the men's home has a van. I could have jumped in the van and left. I had the keys. I drove it. Yeah.
They trusted you.
Yeah, you know, the pastor he just trusted me.
And you have a history of stealing everything in sight.
Everything in sight.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I liked about it is the pastor wanted me to stay there. He wanted me to, he was a pastor that would take heroin addicts and make them pastors.
Wow.
Yeah. From his men's home, the men's home I was in, there must have been 16 or 17 different pastors that were pastoring at the time that were heroin addicts that went through his men's home. His name was Pastor Danny Zendejas. And he was tough, but he discipled me himself. I would go with him everywhere.
Praise the Lord.
And he discipled me, and he wanted me to stay there. He wanted to send me out. But I had my wife and my kids still, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, but it came to a time where it was time for me to go. I met the pastor that became my pastor, my wife's pastor. I had never known him before. I met him at one of the conferences there at the church. And I went home. I was under my pastor. You know, so during that time, the Lord started telling me, you know what? I delivered you from that. You know, I took that from you. So, because I couldn't understand how, like, it flicked the switch one morning and all the terrible part of my life disappeared, you know?
Praise God.
But I know for a fact that I'm a miracle of God. You know, people say, well, ain't no miracles. Look at me. I was on the street of Skid Row, you know, with the same pair of pants I've been wearing all week and maybe an extra t-shirt. But he's changed my life and he continues to work in my life. And he shows me the things that he does for me. And I see him in my life, you know, and he's got me here at this church.
So how do you serve the Lord today?
I serve the Lord. I run the security here in our church.
Okay.
I started as just volunteering and moved my way up, and now I actually am the head of security here at the church.
Praise God.
And I know this is where I belong. And as I look back on my life, I believe everything that I went through led me to this place. And everything that I went through in prison and everything that I went through on the streets of Skid Row and in the service and observation led me to be in this position as a security here at our church.
So, what an amazing miracle.
Yeah,
Miraculous story.
You know?
So,
and it's not, it's not just for me, you
What would you say to the young Albert if you could go back in time and speak to yourself? What advice would you give him?
The young Albert, that once, and now everybody makes a mistake, you know, and I believe that the heroin was a spirit that grabbed a hold of me, you know, but I believe that, you know what, you need to pray. When things are tough like that and you can't find your way out, there's something that is keeping you from getting free from that. So you need to find a good church. You need to speak to somebody that is knowledgeable of the Word of God, and they will help you find God.
So it goes without saying that your trajectory in life would have been different had you not started doing heroin.
Oh, definitely.
But maybe we can go back even further. Had you not started doing the other drugs you did in Germany?
Yes.
And not doing marijuana before you went to the service?
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Were you drinking alcohol before you started doing marijuana?
Not before. I didn't start drinking until I went to Germany.
Okay. Okay, so did you do drinking before marijuana? Or marijuana before drinking?
It was marijuana before drinking.
So the very first gateway drug for you was marijuana, not even alcohol?
Definitely marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah. Alcohol has never been a priority in my life.
Okay.
Even while I was using, people would drink and use. I could never afford a beer.
It was really, so the drugs are cheaper than the alcohol?
Well, actually, I would only have enough for drugs. I couldn't afford to buy a beer.
Oh, really?
Because the little change that I have, I'd buy $1 worth of rice.
Is that what they call it? Rice?
No, rice.
Oh, rice.
Actual rice.
Okay.
In order to feed myself for the day.
Okay.
But if I had anything extra, it was for the next day or just to feed myself, you know?
Okay.
I couldn't afford alcohol.
What would you say to the world, maybe to a young person who's considering getting into drugs?
Don't do it, you know, it's not worth, because you never know where it's going to take you. You know, for me, it took me to two of the worst penitentiaries that there is. I mean, there's one worse now, but two of the worst penitentiaries there is, and put me in peril of my life every day while I was there, you know?
Right.
Some people think, oh, prison's cool, you know? Prison is not cool.
Because you had to do things that were horrific.
Yeah.
Was it an enforcer?
At first, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got to be well known, you know, so.
For a bad thing.
And didn't actually have to do it. I would just make sure it was done.
So you directed people who...
They would send me along to make sure things were done right.
Okay.
But there was times where, you know, blood would flow.
So we're talking about beating people up until they gave up money or whatever to pay back?
It depended on what it was.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely. And if I would have got caught for those things, I probably would have never got out.
Right.
You know? Because it's just a sleight of hand with the homemade shank, and somebody dies, you know?
Right. It's actually amazing that somebody didn't shank you, for instance.
Right. Yeah. Because there were racial things, you know?
Okay.
And not just a couple guys that were from a different race. I'm talking about the whole yard, you know? 300-400 guys at one time on the yard against whoever you got with you, you know? Mm-hmm. And just a clash. And then you got the gunners that you got the gunners, the actual officers that want to make sure you don't hurt somebody.
Okay.
So it was pretty horrific. But one thing I do remember is feeling it. Feeling the evil. Like when I would come out on the yard, just say going out to lift weights, me and my buddy, because everywhere I went, I had somebody with me. And as soon as I'd come out the door, I would stop and I'd look at him and I said, you feel that? He goes, yeah, I feel it. Something's gonna happen. He said, well, we're already out. We gotta stay out. You know, we can't go back in now. And sure enough, 15 minutes later, and somebody gets a dumbbell dropped on their head. You know?
You could feel that before
You
it
could
happened.
feel the evil before things would happen.
Wow.
And that was, I don't know, it had to have been just the evilness there already waiting for something to happen. But I felt that a few times. And it's not a good feeling knowing that you're trying to put your back up against the wall to make sure it's not going to be you that's going to be hurt.
Right.
But that's just one thing that, if you think it's cool being in prison, it is not.
Okay.
You fear for your life.
Thank Jesus for miraculously saving
Oh,
you,
thank
and
you, Lord.
and your wife never leaving you and
No.
praying for you.
She never left me, man.
So you would probably put a lot of your recovery to your wife being faithful and
Yes.
praying for you. And
To the day.
And Jesus saving you miraculously.
Yes, miraculously.
And now you're serving the Lord.
And now I'm serving the Lord, and I will never look back.
Amen.
Some people say never say never. I say never gonna look back.
Amen.
Because I know what's on the other side, and there's nothing there. When I have this peace and this joy in my heart, and the ugliness, because I was a mean person, bro. I wasn't only mean, I was vicious. And if you got into an argument with me, I would make sure and got the last word. I would make sure that you would not get the last word on me, inside or out, So now I have this peace, Now I have this joy that it's so awesome. And just to get up in the morning and put my feet on the ground and knowing that I'm free, just like the song today.
Amen.
Thank God I'm free. Hallelujah, I'm free. And I'll never look back, brother.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay. God bless you.
God bless you.